Hey guys, Travis here again. Okay, so today we're going to be taking a look at some basic phrases in Japanese. Just to kind of give you an example how this works. I know Google Translate isn't always the most accurate way, but for some reason I always have no problem using it. But I mean, I do know these phrases off the top of my head. But keep in mind, there are more than one way to write. There's more than one way to write some of these phrases. But like for example, we would have like "Hello, how are you?" and then we'd go over here. We'd say, and like for example, this would be the this would be how you would write it with the letters, symbols, and then this would be the Romaji of it, for example. So like for example, we'd have Konnichiwa, Genki desu ka, which means how are you? So that would be like a really good phrase to really I mean again, like I said, there's more than one way to do it. And if anything, this might be more of a formal way of doing it rather than like maybe the easiest way to do it. It really just depends. Japan, Asia, they're really organized with how they present themselves. Like people have like formal titles, like for example, like how to address your aunt, your family members, your brothers, your sisters. It's just how their culture is very brought up. It's very organized. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is, you might have to. I'll have to make another video explaining, like, you know, what phrases are formal and which ones are, like what essentially means what. Like when would you use this? When would you use that? But these are just to kind of give you a couple examples, like how some words are formed and how to pronounce them, and what they translate to, rather. Here's another good one. Good night. Oh, here's a good example of it. Okay, so like you have oyasumi, and then if you go down here, you might notice how there's another one, which means good night with a different, like with an exclamation point. There's a good example. Oyasumi nasai, which means essentially good night, but with the Japanese text. So essentially what's really interesting about this is the verb always goes at the end, if you didn't already know that. The subject, the sentence structure in Japanese is always like in English. If you know English, it's real easy. If you know Japanese, if you want to know Japanese though, the verbs always go at the end. In English, the verbs always go in the middle. And then, for example, it's like subject, verb, objective. So, like, for example, Travis went to the store. I use this example a lot because it's really easy to understand. Like, Travis would be the subject. The verb is, you know, what is the subject itself doing. And the objective is what is essentially what... Or no, how the so like the verb is what the subject is essentially, like how they're achieving their objective, and the objective is like what are they doing, obviously. So again, you know, subject, the person, the noun, you know, the main focus of the sentence. Then you have the verb is how they're achieving their objective, and the objective is what are they doing. You know, makes sense. So in Japanese, it can go, from what I understand, it's subject, objective, verb, and it can actually be vice versa sometimes. Like for example, objective, subject, verb, but the verb always goes at the end. And believe me, you'll know, because again, when you read sentences in Japanese, you'll understand how this stuff works. So it should give you an understanding of how the Japanese sentences work, in a sense that you'll understand. I mean, you'll essentially make sense of it, and you'll know you're doing it right the more you learn it and the more you see it. Okay, so here's another really good example of like there's more than one way to write a word. Okay, so here we have bye-bye. Now you can actually write it like this, bye-bye, and then you can actually, like there's another word like sayonara. Sayonara? Yeah. So it's like sayonara, which, you know, people have obviously said that one many times before. You've probably heard of that one. Here's another good example of words, like the word there would be soko in Japanese. And then as you can see down here, here's many other ways. See, another good feature that I like about Google Translate in a lot of aspects is it also tells you like the most common accepted one, and it will always give you that one first, and then it will give you all these other ones, and it will tell you if they're adverbs, you know, verbs, nouns, you know, like essentially like it gives you a lot of examples, and it will essentially show you, kind of like Jisho, and it's a little bit more organized as well. So now, like the word now, like it's happening right now, ima. So you have ima, and this is another example of a kanji right there. Now the word later would actually be an example. Again, you know, here's another kanji, and I forget if that one's necessarily a... Oh yeah, I forgot to explain this. In hiragana, katakana, and kanji, you can tell, you know, like I was saying, like you had the basic sets and then you had the advanced sets. If they have like a circle in the corner or two dots like this, two lines, then that means they're an advanced letter. But the only ones that have the circles are the P ones, like P, Pa, Pu, Pe, Po. You know, like for example, so like this would be day. So like tode, which means later in Japanese. So here's another one, kashite. So there's a good example. Like some of these words, you'd be surprised that sometimes you'll run into like double nouns and all that, double continents, and you'd be surprised how that really kind of confuses people. So you got to make kind of like you got to kind of hold it for a second and then kind of skip over to the next one really fast. Now here's another example, how, like do, yat, te. Here's another good example, itsu. And then here's another good example, the word where, like doko. Here's another good example of kanji, the word who, dare. See, in English we would refer to this as dare, but in Japanese it's dare.